politics and Ivy got tales to share. Life in general, we go everywhere. From politics to soul repair. Tune in now, we got time to spare.
Welcome back, everybody. And today we're going to be taking a deep dive into creativity.
Ooh, very nice.
Yeah. So I've been reading this book by Rubin. It's called The Creative Act, A Way of Being.
Yeah.
And it's been really blowing my mind. I have to admit, I've always thought about creativity as something, like it's the realm of artists.
Right.
Musicians and poets and, the people that we kind of put on a pedestal as the creative people.
They're right. Yeah.
But Rubin, he's making this really compelling case that we are all creative. And we are all artists in a way.
Yeah, I love that about this book. It's very empowering, I think, for people to read that and really kind of take it on board.
Yeah, definitely.
Like he's saying that, you don't have to have some special talent or be, quote unquote gifted in some way to be creative. It's really just a way of being in the world.
Yeah, and I love the way that he starts out the book by just saying, regardless of whether or not we are formally making art, like going to school for art, or being paid to do art, or whatever, we are all living as artists because every day we're bombarded with so much information and sensory, just all this sensory input.
Yeah,
and we're constantly filtering that. We're making choices about what to pay attention to, what to ignore, what to value.
Yeah, and I think that's such an important point that, even just the act of paying attention is creative.
Right.
It's like we're constantly curating our own reality, We're deciding what we want to see, what we want to hear, what we want to experience. And that in itself is a creative act.
Right. And that, it made me think about how we also shape the reality of those around us.
Yeah.
By, how we interact with them, what we project, our energy, our mood, all those things influence the people around us.
Totally. I mean, you think about if you're walking down the street and you smile at someone, that could change their whole day.
Right.
You know, you're putting out a little bit of creative energy into the world, and it's having a ripple effect.
Exactly. Yeah. So okay. So this idea that this idea of source.
Right. Yeah.
This is so he describes this as like this inexhaustible wellspring of creative energy that exists outside of us.
Yeah, it's kind of like a vast ocean of ideas. It's just out there, and we can tap into it.
Right. So okay. So think about this. So he uses this analogy of a cloud.
Oh, yeah.
Right. So like a cloud never really disappears. Right. Like even when it rains, that water goes into the ocean. The water evaporates. It comes up. It forms another cloud. And it's constantly changing forms.
Right. It's a cycle.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. And so he's saying that creative ideas are kind of like that. Like they're always circulating.
Yeah. They're out there in the ether, and they're just kind of floating around, waiting for us to tap into them.
Right. And he's also saying that a lot of times what we think of as being like a really original idea, a lot of times it's actually just kind of like taking something that's already there and just kind of like reframing it.
Yeah.
Or giving it a new twist.
Yeah. It's like that saying, there's nothing new under the sun.
Right. Yeah.
It's all just kind of reinterpretations and new combinations of things that have already existed.
Yeah. So it's like that thing where you hear a piece of music.
Right.
And you think, oh, this is so familiar, but then you realize, oh, it's actually just like this other song that I love,
right?
But it's like a different genre, or it's whatever.
Yeah. It's like you hear a melody and it reminds you of something else, but you can't quite put your finger on it.
Right. Yeah. And it's like this thing that's familiar, but it's returning in a new form.
Right. Yeah, and I think that speaks to this idea that creativity is often about making connections.
Right.
It's about seeing the relationships between things that might seem disparate on the surface.
Yeah. And then he talks about this idea of the vessel and the filter.
Okay. Yeah.
And the vessel he describes as like our inner container of experiences.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And the filter is how we uniquely process information.
Mm-hmm.
But he says it's important to note that our filtering processes aren't always accurate.
Right. Yeah. I mean, we're human, right?
Yeah.
We make mistakes. We miss things. We have biases.
Right.
We're not perfect.
Right. And so that made me think, like, what credible ideas are we missing?
Mm-hmm.
Or what are we filtering out?
Right. Yeah. It's like what if we could see the world without our filters?
Yeah.
What amazing things would we be able to perceive?
Right. And it makes me think about, how much our upbringing and our culture and just all of our experiences have shaped how we see the world.
Right. Yeah, I mean, our filters are basically like, a product of everything that we've been exposed to.
Right.
All of our experiences, all of our beliefs, our values, our fears, our hopes.
Mhm.
It all gets kind of mixed up in there, and
Yeah.
it creates this lens through which we see the world.
Right. So how do we refine that? How do we find that filter, or become more aware of what we might be missing?
Well, that's where I think Rubin's ideas about awareness come in.
Yeah.
He talks about this idea of detached noticing,
Okay.
which is basically about observing the world around us and even our own thoughts and feelings without judgment.
Okay. So
Yeah.
so it's like we're stepping back and we're becoming an observer of our own experience.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's not about trying to control our thoughts or feelings. It's just about noticing them, being aware of them
Right.
without getting caught up in them.
Right. And he actually has an awareness exercise in the book.
Oh, yeah.
And so he suggests starting with something simple like your breath,
Right. Yeah.
or an object that's nearby,
Mm-hmm.
and just really focusing your attention on it.
Yeah. Just allowing yourself to experience it fully.
Mm.
Without trying to analyze it or categorize it.
Right.
Just being present with it.
Yeah. I love that. It's like hitting the pause button on all the mental chatter and just being present in the moment.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the more we practice that, the more we develop our capacity for awareness.
Right.
And that awareness can then extend to other areas of our lives, including our creative work.
So by quieting our minds and paying attention, we're actually opening ourselves up to a wider range of creative possibilities.
Exactly. Yeah. It's like, if you're trying to listen to a faint radio signal,
Mm.
you need to tune out all the other noise.
Right.
Right. And the same is true for creativity. If we're constantly bombarded with distractions, it's hard to hear that inner voice.
Yeah. It's like tuning into a radio station that we didn't even know existed.
That's a great analogy.
Yeah. Yeah. And he also talks about submerging ourselves in great works of art,
Mm-hmm.
Whether it's music, literature, film, whatever speaks to us. And he says that this can help us to develop our taste.
Right. Yeah. It's like, if you want to be a great chef, you need to eat at great restaurants.
Right. Yeah.
You need to experience what's possible. And the same is true for any creative field. You need to expose yourself to the best of what's out there.
Right. But he's not saying that we should imitate.
No, not at all. It's not about copying. It's about developing our own internal compass.
Yeah.
Our own sense of what's good.
Right.
And that comes from being exposed to a wide range of influences.
Right. So it's like we're training our taste buds by tasting the finest flavors.
Exactly. Yeah. It's like developing a palate.
Right.
The more you experience, the more refined your taste becomes.
Right. Makes me wonder, like, what would happen if we just consumed like great things for a year,
Mm-hmm.
like no junk food,
Right.
no mindless scrolling,
Yeah.
just like the best of the best.
Right. That's a fascinating thought experiment.
Yes.
I think it would probably change us in ways that we can't even imagine.
Right. Yeah.
It would definitely raise our standards.
Yeah.
And it would probably make us more critical of the things that we're consuming,
Right.
but in a good way,
Right.
It would make us more discerning.
Yeah. Like it would recalibrate our creative compass.
I love that. Yeah. That's a great way to put it.
Yeah. And then he also talks about nature as a source of inspiration.
Mm-hmm.
And he talks about how, like, nature's color palette dwarfs any man-made system.
Oh, yeah. He makes this great comparison to, like, choosing colors from a Pantone book
Right.
versus, experiencing the infinite variations of color in a single rock.
Right. Yeah.
Nature is just so much more complex and nuanced than anything that we can create.
Right. Yeah. So it's like nature is just this boundless source of creative possibility.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think there's a valuable lesson there for all of us, instead of getting stuck in our routines and our screens and our man-made environments. What if we made a conscious effort to connect with the natural world more often?
Yeah. And to see it with fresh eyes.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like an artist discovering color for the first time.
Right. Yeah. It's like taking a deep breath of fresh air for art creativity.
I love that. Yeah. That's beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and then he also talks about looking inward for inspiration.
Yeah.
Like exploring our emotions, our memories, our dreams.
Yeah. He talks about keeping a dream journal,
Right.
as a way to tap into that inner world.
Yeah.
Because our dreams are just so rich with imagery and symbolism and emotion.
Yeah. It's like our inner world is just this vast, uncharted territory that's just ripe for creative exploration.
Exactly. Yeah. And what's interesting is that Rubin doesn't privilege one source of inspiration over another. He sees value in both the external and the internal. The grand landscapes of nature and the intricate hidden world of our own minds.
Right.
So it's not about choosing one or the other. It's about cultivating awareness and openness to inspiration wherever we find it.
Yeah. And sometimes it comes from the most unexpected places, right?
Oh, totally.
Yeah. And one of the things that I found really interesting is how he talks about randomness.
Oh, yeah. That's a good one.
Yeah, this idea that embracing chance encounters and unexpected twists and turns can actually unlock new creative pathways. Like throwing the I Ching or using a random word generator. It's like surrendering control and allowing the unexpected to emerge. And it almost sounds counterintuitive, doesn't it?
It does. Yeah. It's like we tend to think that creativity is about control. About having a plan and executing it.
Right.
But Rubin is saying that sometimes the best way to get to a creative breakthrough is to let go of that control.
Right. Yeah. So it's not about abandoning all structure and planning.
Right.
It's about finding that balance between intention and openness. Right.
Yeah. It's like you need to have a destination in mind, but you also need to be open to the possibility of taking a detour along the way.
Right. Yeah. And he also talks about how the environment we're in can impact our creativity.
Yeah.
And he contrasts isolated locations, like, being out in a forest or a monastery with bustling locations, like, a busy cafe or a city street.
Yeah.
And he suggests that different environments can foster different types of creative energy.
Right. Yeah. I mean, some people need quiet and solitude to create, while others thrive on the energy of a crowd.
Right.
So it really depends on the individual.
Yeah. And what type of work you're doing.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah.
So it's about finding what works for you.
Yeah. So it's like there's no one size fits all approach to creativity.
Right. Yeah. What works for one person might not work for another.
Yeah.
So it's important to experiment and to find what resonates with you.
Yeah. And to embrace the fact that it's a process. It's not about having all the answers. It's about being willing to explore and to make mistakes.
Yeah. And to learn from those mistakes.
Right.
Yeah. That's how we grow.
Right. So instead of trying to force ourselves into a predetermined mold, we should embrace the messy, unpredictable, and often surprising nature of the creative process.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's where I think Rubin's emphasis on playfulness comes in.
Okay, yeah. Let's talk about that.
He believes that we should approach our work with a sense of lightness and joy,
Yeah.
Even when we're dealing with serious subject matter. It's about not taking ourselves too seriously.
Right.
And allowing ourselves to have fun.
And this kind of leads to a good a good place to stop for today, and we'll pick this up in part 2.
Okay, great.
But I'm curious to hear what he has to say about collaboration, because I think that's something that a lot of people struggle with.
Yeah. Collaboration can be tricky.
Yeah.
But it can also be incredibly rewarding.
Yeah, definitely.
So yeah, I'm looking forward to diving into that in part 2.
Awesome. All right.
Picking up where we left off, Rubin has some really insightful things to say about collaboration.
Okay.
He's a huge proponent of it.
Okay.
He sees it as a way to amplify creative energy and to achieve results that wouldn't be possible alone.
Okay.
But it's not just about bringing people together.
Yeah.
It's about a specific approach, a mindset that fosters true creative synergy.
That makes sense, yeah, because collaboration can be really tricky.
Absolutely.
I've had experiences where it's felt more like a tug of war than a true partnership.
Exactly. And that's where Rubin's emphasis on cooperation comes in.
Okay.
He distinguishes this from mere collaboration,
Got you.
highlighting the importance of mutual respect, open communication, and a shared commitment to achieving the highest possible outcome for the project.
Right.
It's not about ego or control.
Right.
It's about serving the work itself.
So it's like shifting from a me versus you mentality to a we're in this together mindset.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And Rubin offers some great tips for fostering this cooperative spirit.
Okay.
For example, he stresses the importance of active listening,
Mm-hmm.
of really trying to understand each other's perspectives, even when you disagree.
Right.
He also talks about the power of yes and,
Mm-hmm.
where you build upon each other's ideas rather than shutting them down.
That yes and approach, that reminds me a lot of improv comedy.
Oh, yeah.
Where you're constantly accepting and expanding upon the suggestions of your fellow performers.
Absolutely.
And it creates this really cool sense of flow and possibility.
That's a great connection.
Yeah.
And it highlights the importance of playfulness and collaboration.
Mm-hmm.
Rubin reminds us that competition serves the ego.
Right.
Cooperation supports the highest outcome.
Right.
He's not suggesting that we should always agree with each other,
Right.
but rather that we should approach creative differences as opportunities for growth and discovery,
Mm-hmm.
not as battles to be won.
I love that. Yeah, it's like using collaboration as a way to bounce ideas off of each other, to refine our thinking, and to arrive at solutions that we might not have found on our own.
Exactly. And he uses this great analogy
Oh,
about collaboration being like getting a boost to see over a high wall.
Oh, yeah, I like that one.
It's about combining our strength, leveraging each other's perspectives, and working together to achieve a shared vision that transcends our individual limitations.
And he makes a really important point about the goal of collaboration, right?
Yes.
Like, it's not about finding a compromise that everyone can live with,
Right.
but rather a solution that everyone loves.
Yes, he's very adamant about this. He says, the moment one collaborator gives in and settles on a less preferential option for the sake of moving forward, everyone loses.
Yeah.
And that really resonated with me because I think we've all been in situations where we've compromised our creative vision for the sake of expediency or to avoid conflict.
Yeah.
But Rubin is saying that ultimately those compromises diminish the work.
So it's about pushing through those difficult conversations,
Mhm.
being honest about our preferences,
Yeah,
and working together to find solutions that truly excite everyone involved.
exactly. And that might mean going through multiple iterations, being willing to scrap ideas and starting over again.
Mm.
But if you can create that environment of trust and mutual respect,
Yeah.
the rewards can be extraordinary.
It's like you're creating a kind of alchemy
Mm-hmm.
where individual ideas combine and react to form something entirely new and unexpected.
Yeah.
It makes me think about those moments in music history where two artists from completely different backgrounds came together and created something truly groundbreaking.
Absolutely.
Think about David Bowie and Iggy Pop,
Yeah.
or Run DMC and Aerosmith.
Oh, yeah. Great examples.
Those collaborations broke down genre barriers and pushed the boundaries of what was considered possible.
I love that. And it's inspiring to think that we can all tap into that collaborative magic, even in our own creative endeavors.
Yeah, absolutely. And that brings us to another key concept that Rubin emphasizes: honoring the essence of a creative work.
Ooh.
Okay.
Okay.
I remember being really intrigued by this part of the book. It's about stripping away anything unnecessary, right?
Yes.
cutting back to the bare bones to reveal the core truth of what you're trying to express.
Yeah, it's like that classic advice to kill your darlings.
Right.
Sometimes the things we love most about our work are actually the things that are holding it back.
He asked that really provocative question. What can be removed without compromising the integrity of the work?
Precisely. And I think this is where the role of the editor comes in. Whether it's a literal editor in the case of writing or filmmaking,
Right.
or that internal editor we all have to cultivate when we're assessing our own work.
Right. Yeah, it's about stepping back, looking at the work with fresh eyes, and asking ourselves, what is truly essential here? What is adding to the overall impact, and what is just clutter or noise?
Exactly. And this can be a really challenging process, especially when we're attached to certain ideas or elements. Rubin talked about this fear of completion, this commitment phobia that many creatives experience.
Oh, I definitely relate to that.
Yeah.
It's like that reluctance to let go of the work, to declare it finished and release it into the world.
Yeah, he makes a good point, doesn't he?
Yeah.
He says, art doesn't get made on the clock,
Right.
but it can get finished on the clock.
Right. Yeah. Sometimes setting a deadline, even an artificial one, can help us overcome that fear and finally say, this is it. This is the best I can do.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's like we need to create a container for the creative process. Otherwise, it can just go on forever. Right?
Exactly. And that container can be a deadline, a word count, a budget, a canvas size, whatever provides those necessary constraints.
But I think honoring the essence goes beyond just trimming the fat, right?
Absolutely.
It's also about finding the most powerful way to express your core idea.
Absolutely. It's about precision, clarity,
Right.
and impact. Rubin talks about this in terms of energy.
Okay.
He says that great art contains a certain charge, a vitality that we can feel, and that energy is often amplified when we strip away anything that's extraneous or distracting.
It's like we're refining the signal,
Yeah.
so to speak, so that the message comes through loud and clear.
That's a great way to put it. And speaking of refining the signal, Rubin also talks about the importance of rules in the creative process.
Okay, this is where I get a little confused. I thought he was all about breaking the rules, about embracing spontaneity and experimentation.
He is, but he also acknowledges the value of rules, particularly what he calls temporary rules.
Okay.
He explains that setting limitations can actually spark creativity.
Yeah.
It's like those constraints force you to think outside the box, to find innovative solutions.
So it's like giving yourself a creative challenge.
Exactly. He gives some fascinating examples, like the writer Georges Perec, who wrote an entire novel without using the letter E.
Wow.
Or the painter Yves Klein, who limited his palette to a single shade of blue.
Wow. Those are pretty extreme examples.
Sure, yeah.
I can see how those limitations would force you to be really resourceful. And I remember reading about the Dogny 95 movement in filmmaking.
Oh, yes.
Those are, like those 10 strict rules that Lars von Trier and his collaborators came up with.
Yeah.
Things like shooting on location, using only natural light, no special effects.
Yeah.
They were deliberately limiting themselves in order to find new ways of telling stories.
Exactly.
And it actually led to some really interesting and groundbreaking films.
Yes, it did.
It's like those limitations forced them to tap into a different kind of creative energy.
Precisely, and I think that's the key point. Rules can be incredibly useful tools for sparking creativity.
Right.
But only if we use them intentionally and with awareness.
Right. We have to be careful not to let those rules become dogma.
Yes.
Or to blindly follow them without questioning their validity.
Exactly, and that's where Rubin's concept of beginner's mind comes in.
Oh, this is one of my favorite concepts in the book.
Oh, good.
It's about approaching things with a fresh perspective, right?
Yes.
Like a child seeing the world for the first time.
Precisely. Rubin tells that fascinating story about AlphaGo.
Oh, yeah.
The AI that beats the world champion Go player.
Okay, remind me about that.
So Go is this ancient and incredibly complex board game. And for centuries, humans have been developing strategies and techniques for playing it.
Right.
But AlphaGo, because it wasn't programmed with all that human knowledge, it was able to approach the game with a completely fresh perspective.
Right.
It ended up making moves that had never been seen before.
Oh, wow.
Moves that completely baffled the grandmaster.
And that's because it wasn't limited by those preconceived notions of what a good move should look like.
Exactly. Exactly. And what Rubin takes away from that is the power of approaching our creative work with that same beginner's mind, that same openness to new possibilities,
Right.
that willingness to question the assumptions that we might not even realize we're holding on to.
Yeah, so it's about unlearning those ingrained patterns and allowing ourselves to see things with fresh eyes,
Yes.
to discover those unexpected solutions that might be hidden in plain sight.
Precisely. And Rubin even suggests some practical exercises for cultivating this beginner's mind.
Okay.
For example, he talks about the importance of tuning out
Okay.
those undermining voices, both internal and external.
So you mean like that inner critic that tells us we're not good enough?
Yes.
Or those external voices like critics, or even well-meaning friends and family who might unintentionally steer us away from our true creative vision.
Yes, it's about creating a safe space for our creative exploration, a space where we can experiment freely without fear of judgment.
Right, yeah.
He also talks about the importance of self-awareness,
Okay.
but not in the usual sense. He's talking about a specific kind of awareness that's tuned into the creative process itself.
Okay, what do you mean?
He's talking about paying attention to those subtle energetic shifts that happen within us as we're creating, noticing what excites us,
Right.
what makes us lean forward, what feels right in our gut. He
Right.
calls it the ecstatic.
Okay.
Those moments of pure creative joy where we glimpse something truly special emerging.
I love that it's like we're tapping into a flow state.
Yes.
Where everything just clicks and the creative energy is flowing effortlessly through us.
Exactly. And he points out that these moments of the ecstatic often happen when we least expect them, when we're not trying too hard, when we're open to surprise.
So it's about trusting the process, surrendering control,
Yeah.
and allowing the creative energy to flow through us.
Precisely. But trusting the process doesn't mean we should just wander around aimlessly hoping inspiration will strike. Rubin also emphasizes the importance of having a framework for evaluating our work, what he calls a point of reference.
I'm curious to hear more about that because I think it's something a lot of us struggle with, especially when we're first starting out.
Yeah.
How do we know if we're on the right track?
Right.
How do we assess the quality of our own work?
That's a great question, and it's one that Rubin addresses head on.
Okay.
He talks about how it's easy to fall into the trap of comparing ourselves to others,
Right.
of chasing trends, or of relying solely on external validation to determine the worth of our work. But ultimately, he argues, the only point of reference that truly matters is our own internal compass.
Right, because what's considered good or successful is always changing. And what one person loves, another person might hate.
Exactly.
So it's like we have to develop our own internal barometer for what resonates with us, what feels true and authentic to our own creative vision.
Exactly. He says, measurement of greatness is subjective, like art itself. And he makes a really powerful statement about the purpose of art. If you think, I don't like it, but someone else will, you are not making art for yourself. You found yourself in the business of commerce, which is fine.
Yeah.
It just may not be art.
Wow, that's really thought-provoking.
Yeah.
It's like he's challenging us to be ruthlessly honest with ourselves about why we're creating in the first place. If it's not for the pure joy of it,
Right.
if it's not an expression of our own unique perspective, then maybe it's not art.
I think that's a really valuable distinction to make. And it ties into what he says about the energy in the work. He believes that truly great art contains a certain charge, a vitality that you can feel.
It's like a vibration, right?
Yeah.
Something that resonates deep within you and leaves you feeling moved or transformed in some way.
Exactly. And he emphasizes that this energy isn't something we create. It's something we tap into.
Right.
It's already there waiting to be discovered.
So it's like we're plugging into this universal current of creativity, this source that he keeps talking about.
Precisely. And when we're in alignment with that energy, when we're truly staying in it, as he puts it, that's when the magic happens.
So how do we stay in that flow? How do we avoid getting distracted or losing momentum?
Yeah.
Especially when those undermining voices start creeping in.
Rubin suggests a few strategies.
Okay.
One is to surround the lightning bolt.
What does that mean?
It means that when inspiration strikes, when we have that flash of insight or that surge of creative energy, we need to seize the moment and capture it as fully as possible.
Okay.
He uses the analogy of a lightning bolt.
Okay.
It's this powerful force that we can't control, but we can harness its energy if we're prepared.
So if you're a writer and you're suddenly hit with a flood of ideas, don't stop.
Yeah.
Keep writing.
Yeah.
Even if it's just a jumble of notes or fragments.
It does.
Or if you're a musician and you come up with a killer melody, record it immediately. Even if it's just on your phone.
Exactly.
Don't let those precious moments slip away.
And this brings us to another important point that Rubin makes.
Okay.
Expect a surprise.
Okay.
He's talking about the importance of being open to the unexpected, to allowing the creative process to unfold in its own way.
That reminds me of something we were talking about earlier about the power of randomness.
Yes.
It's like sometimes the best ideas come from those unexpected detours, those moments where we veer off our carefully planned course and stumble upon something new and exciting.
He says the best work reveals itself. It's not something we force.
Right.
It's something we discover.
And sometimes those surprises come in the form of mistakes or happy accidents.
Yeah.
Things that we didn't plan for, but that end up adding a whole new dimension to the work.
He gives the example of the Ramones.
Oh, yeah.
Who thought they were making mainstream pop music,
right,
but ended up inventing punk rock.
That's a great example.
Yeah.
It's like they stumbled into something truly original precisely because they weren't trying to fit into any pre-existing category.
Exactly. And this openness to surprise is closely linked to Rubin's concept of spontaneity.
Okay.
You know, he encourages us to embrace those moments of unplanned creativity, those bursts of energy that can lead us in unexpected directions.
Yeah, I remember him talking about how some musicians write their best songs while driving.
Yeah.
Or how a change of scenery can spark new ideas. It's about breaking out of those routine patterns.
Yeah.
And allowing our subconscious mind to take over.
Precisely. Sometimes our most brilliant ideas come to us when we're not even actively trying to create.
Right.
It's like our minds need that space, that freedom from conscious control to make those unexpected connections.
So it's like we need to give ourselves permission to play, to experiment, to make messes without worrying about the outcome.
Exactly, he says. Sometimes disengaging is the best way to engage.
I love that.
Yeah.
It's so counterintuitive, but it makes so much sense.
It does,
Yeah, and it leads perfectly into our next topic, which is all about embracing those moments of playfulness, even when we're tackling serious creative challenges.
Yeah, that's such a great point. Sometimes disengaging is the best way to engage. That really resonates with me. Like when I'm really stuck on something, you know, a problem or I'm hitting a wall creatively.
Yeah.
The best thing for me to do is just to walk away.
Right.
To step away from it, you know, maybe go for a walk or just do something completely different. And it's amazing how often the solution or the breakthrough will just kind of pop into my head. It's like magic, isn't it?
It is.
Like you step away, you give your mind a rest, and then boom.
Right.
The answer appears.
Yeah, and it makes me think about something else that Rubin talks about a lot in the book, which is this idea of playfulness.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
And how important it is to approach our creative work with a sense of lightness and curiosity. Especially when we're facing those inevitable creative blocks.
Yeah, and I think that's something that a lot of us forget as we get older.
Right.
You know, we get so caught up in the seriousness of life that we forget how to play.
Right.
But play is essential for creativity.
Yeah. I remember him suggesting different techniques, like deliberately introducing randomness into the process.
Yes.
You know, like or working on a project for a set amount of time. Without any specific goal in mind.
Right. It's like giving your mind permission to wander.
Right.
To explore without the pressure of having to produce a specific outcome.
Right. Yeah. It's like giving ourselves that space to just kind of like mess around and see what happens.
And what's fascinating is that Rubin doesn't see these playful experiments as a waste of time. He actually says, distraction is not procrastination. Procrastination consistently undermines our ability to make things.
Right.
Distraction is a strategy in service of the work.
Oh, I love that.
It's such a liberating idea. It's like he's giving us permission to embrace those moments of seeming unproductivity as valuable parts of the creative journey.
Yeah, and you know, it makes me think about those happy accidents that we were talking about earlier. You know, those moments where we stumble upon something new and unexpected, precisely because we weren't trying to control every aspect of the process.
Exactly. And I think that ties into his broader point about trusting the process. You know, when we let go of our need to control every aspect of the creative journey,
Right.
when we embrace the unexpected detours and the seemingly random discoveries.
We open ourselves up to a whole new world of possibilities.
Right. So it's not just about playing around for the sake of it.
Right.
It's about using play as a tool for exploration, for pushing beyond our comfort zones,
Yeah.
for discovering those unexpected solutions that we might not have found through more linear, goal-oriented methods.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think that spirit of playful exploration can be incredibly valuable in all aspects of life, not just in our creative endeavors.
Right, like bringing that sense of curiosity and wonder to everything that we do. You know, whether it's our work or our relationships or just simply our interactions with the world around us.
Exactly. It's about approaching life with a sense of openness and possibility.
Yeah. And you know, speaking of interactions, you know, Rubin has some really interesting things to say about collaboration.
Oh, yes.
which we've touched on a little bit. But I'd love to kind of dive into that a little bit deeper. Yeah, me too. It's such a rich topic.
Yeah.
And it's one that Rubin has a lot of experience with.
Right.
You know, as a music producer, he's spent his career collaborating with some of the most iconic artists of our time. So he really understands the dynamics involved.
Yeah, and what I found so interesting is how he sees collaboration as this really fundamental aspect of the creative process, even when we're working alone.
Exactly. He talks about how nothing begins with us.
Right.
You know, it's always a collaboration, whether we're consciously aware of it or not.
Right. We're collaborating with the artists who came before us, with the culture we live in, with the tools we use, even with our own past selves.
It's like we're always standing on the shoulders of giants, building upon the work that has come before us.
And then when we bring other people into the mix, it expands those possibilities exponentially. Right.
Absolutely. And as we discussed earlier, Rubin emphasizes the importance of approaching collaboration with a spirit of cooperation.
Right.
Where the focus is on achieving the highest possible outcome for the project.
Right.
Not on individual ego or control.
Yeah, and he makes that really important point about not settling for compromises.
Yes.
You know, like the goal is to find a solution that everyone loves.
Yes.
Not just a solution that everyone can tolerate.
Exactly. It's about pushing through those initial disagreements, those moments of friction.
Right.
To arrive at a place where everyone feels truly aligned and excited about the direction of the work.
Yeah. Like finding that magical sweet spot where individual perspectives converge to create something that's greater than the sum of their parts.
It's a beautiful thing when it happens, isn't it?
It is, yeah.
Yeah.
And I think it's a beautiful way to think about collaboration, not just in the context of creative work, but in all aspects of life.
I agree. It's about recognizing that we're all interconnected.
That we all have something unique to offer.
Right.
And that by working together with a spirit of generosity and open-mindedness, we can achieve truly extraordinary things.
Yeah. So as we kind of come to the end of our deep dive into the creative act, I think the key takeaway for me is that it's not just about talent or skill.
Right.
You know, it's about a way of being in the world.
It's about cultivating awareness, embracing spontaneity,
Right.
trusting the process, collaborating with others,
Right.
and honoring the essence of what we're trying to create.
Yeah. It's about finding that delicate balance between discipline and playfulness, effort and surrender.
Yeah.
The individual and the universal.
And as Rick Rubin so eloquently reminds us, it's a journey, not a destination.
Right.
There's always more to learn, more to explore, more to create.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into creativity.
I want to leave you with a simple question.
Okay.
What small creative act can you commit to today?
Good question.
Even if it's just for 5 minutes.
Yeah, just 5 minutes.
Pick up a pen and write a few lines, play a few notes on an instrument, sketch an image, whatever speaks to you.
Yeah, just do something to get those creative juices flowing.
Yeah, because the journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step.
Absolutely.
So keep exploring, keep creating, and keep diving deep.
Until next time.
Alex and Ivy got tales to share. Life in general, we go everywhere. From politics to soul repair. Tune in now, we got time to spare.